Okay. All right. Hello, everybody that is watching. We are super excited to have you guys and excited to start this panel. Welcome to the pre-med interview preparedness panel, where we are going to be talking about how to interview for medical schools and kind of what that process looks like, depending on the type of school that you are looking to apply to. So my name is Tyler. I'm a second year at St. Louis University School of Medicine, and I am currently interested in cardiothoracic surgery. Some of the stuff that I am involved in with my school, I'm the academic affairs co-coordinator with National MAPS alongside my partner, Bria Williams. And then I also serve as the co-president of the Student National Medical Association for my local chapter. And then additionally, I'm the curriculum representative with lovely Kathleen Botterbush, who you might see on the side of your screen for my preclinical class as well. So like I said, we're super excited to start this series. The goal is to help you guys as pre-medical students prepare for your interview as best you can. So then I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our panelists. So all of our panelists here are from St. Louis University School of Medicine. The first panelist we have is student Dr. Natalia Alston. She is a second year at St. Louis University School of Medicine. Natalia, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sorry, it's a lot of noise because I live right by the hospital here at SLU. Once again, my name is Natalia Austin. I am from Chicago, Illinois. I am a second year. I graduated from Mizzou with my graduate degree in my bachelor's in science and biological sciences, and then I went to get my master's degree at Roosevelt University in biomedical sciences. I'm a non-traditional student, and I am interested in OB/GYN. When I was applying, I applied to maybe 24 schools, and I got accepted into 2.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalia. Okay, next is Alexis. She's a first year at St. Louis University School of Medicine. Alexis, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how many medical schools you applied to.
Yeah, so I'm Alexis. I'm a first year. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I went to school down there. So at NC State, I got a degree in biological sciences. I graduated in 2022. So I took a year off, did some work in the OR. Now I'm part of LMSA, which is our Latino Medical Student Association, and also getting involved in research. When I applied to 29 schools with completed secondaries, and I got accepted into 5. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Miss Kathleen. The next one is Kathleen Botterbush. She is a second year at St. Louis University School of Medicine. Kathleen, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how many medical schools you applied to.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. As she said, my name's Kathleen. I am a second year medical student from Godfrey, Illinois at SLU. I went to SLU for undergrad and got a degree in biomedical engineering and then stayed at SLU. I'm an outlier in that SLU was the only school that I applied to. They have kind of an early interview type process, kind of like UMKC and some of the other schools. But it did have like multiple interviews that I had to go through. So it wasn't just like one school interview. Some things I'm involved in. I'm interested in neurosurgery, and so I am the co-president of our AANS chapter, which is like the National Neurosurgery Group. I sit on the AANS CNS section on Women in Neurosurgery Medical Student Committee and the research subcommittee. So if you're interested in any of that, they have mentorship programs and things like that, activities for students, and it's definitely a growing group. I'm also, as Tyler mentioned, co-curriculum representative with her as my partner in crime, so we tackle a lot together in that. And otherwise, I'm doing quite a bit of research as well in neurosurgery. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, and last but not least, it's the Ashley Jones. She is a second year medical student at St. Louis University School of Medicine. Ashley, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how many schools you applied to.
Hello, everyone. As Tyler mentioned, my name is Ashley, and I am a second year at SLU. I am from Arizona, and I graduated from the University of Arizona with my bachelor's in nutrition and a minor in psychology. With that said, I entered in medical school wanting to become a psychiatrist, but now I'm opening my horizon to consider gastroenterology and possibly neurology. In terms of my application cycle during the med school admissions process, I applied to 22 schools and I interviewed at 5 with with the substances at all 5. And yeah, I think that was pretty much it.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Ashley. Okay, so for everyone that's watching, the goal of today, like I had said earlier, is to kind of give you guys some of the insights into how the interview day might look like for you as pre-medical students that are applying to medical school. The hard part that I think we can all agree on this panel is that getting the interview is probably like the struggle. Once you get the interview, that's really your time to shine. So we want to answer as many questions as possible. Feel free to comment. I am able to see your comments, so comment any questions that you may have. At the end, we'll have a Q&A session and kind of answer anything that we might not get to. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and ask my panelists. I'll ask a question, and then panelists, I'll probably direct it to you, and then we can popcorn after that. All right, so Ashley, can you start us off with what a typical interview day might look like?
Yeah, so there were a few variations between my interview days, but for the most part, the outline of the interview day, which was virtual because I was interviewing during COVID, it all started with the admissions committee just giving us a brief background in regards to the school, some of the things that they valued, and then it usually was a virtual tour of the campus, as well as inserts of medical students talking about the things that they enjoyed and how their community rallied together to become strong and cohesive, and some of the things that they felt were the highlights within their school that would be appealing to the applicants. And then followed by that, there were deviations in the sense of sometimes after that presentation that we would go into interviews, or we would be broken into smaller groups, so that way the admissions committee or other medical students could talk to us, and then we would proceed with our individual interviews and then go from there. But overall, just the introduction about the school, the interview, and then a concluding ceremony made by the admissions committee.
Perfect. So then, Natalia, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what your interview day looked like for, in general, the schools that you applied to.
So yeah, so I had 2 interviews and I got accepted to 2 schools. So SLU was much different than my first one. Well, SLU was SLU my first? Yeah, SLU was my first one, excuse me, and then the second one was at UIC. And they had, is it MMI? I can't remember. I feel like so long ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so MMI, they had MMI, and that was the most stressful thing that I've ever experienced leading up into an interview, because I've held jobs, and I've had to interview also for kind of like for my master's program when speaking to some of the advisors, but it was definitely different. So you start off with the general welcome. Sometimes, depending on the schedule and how they schedule you, you can start off with your interview, your individualized interview, or you can do it after the full experience, or even in the middle. So I had the welcome and did all the touring virtually, because just like Ashley said, I was also interviewing during COVID, and they did the virtual tours and everything like that. And then what happened was I went into my interview, and then I came back, and then I finished out the day and having a student panel. So we got split up into different rooms to where we can ask the students themselves. So I think at the time my student was at M2, I believe, and because she's 2 years above me, so yeah, she's an M2. So at that time, she has some experience with, in medical school at that point. So then after that, I had interviewed. They had did a tester, and I had interviewed with one other applicant, and we interviewed with an M4. So they were actually applying for residency at the time. So it was kind of cool to see how I'm now applying to get into medical school, and they're applying to leave. So it was really cool. So that was how SLU's was, but it was pretty much the same at UIC. However, it was just you had that second aspect of that MMI, so you have multiple interviews back to back. So
yeah, those MMIs were definitely scary, and it's one that I was told quite frequently to practice for.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alexis, can you tell us how you prepared for your interview? So the cool thing about Alexis is that she interviewed outside of COVID. So me, Kathleen, Ashley, Natalia interviewed during COVID times. And Alexis has a unique perspective because she was a virtual interview outside of COVID. So Alexis, tell us a little bit about how you prepare for your interviews.
Yeah, so I also interviewed virtually. I think the biggest thing for me whenever I was preparing for interviews was really researching the school, finding out what makes the school different. So obviously, if you get an interview, like the school wants to get to know you. So really understanding, what are your core values as a person and how those align with the school, I think was a big thing for me, especially and this goes into picking schools to apply to as well. But I generally tried to pick schools that aligned with my values. So kind of finding those connections was easy whenever I went into interviews. But really knowing your application back and forth, and then also knowing some unique aspects about the school and how you want to use those moving forward was the biggest thing for me. In addition, I just made sure that I had a professional space to do my interviews in and things like that. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Kathleen, same with you. So how did you prepare for your interview with SLU?
Right. So I, as far as the content of the interview, I made sure to know my application, which is advice that you get a lot. And what that means is just kind of know what you put on there, because you fill it out and submit it in June, and then you may not interview until October or November. So there's several months between whenever you filled it out and whenever you submitted it. And whenever you filled it out, you're trying to have to go back into the vault and get the details of all the different things that you saw whenever you did different activities. And so just make sure you know what's on the paper, because whenever they ask you about them, they can read, they know what's on the paper. They want more than that. They want to know other experiences. They want to know what you learned. They want to know why did they do certain things. So not just what was read on paper. And then also too, I did a lot of mock interviews with career services. Most universities have some sort of career services or an advising office, or even just your academic advisor who's prepared. They probably have a list of questions already that they do it a lot of doing mock interviews with students who are applying to professional schools. And then finally, just the day of the interview, the day before the interview, I went to the space that I was going to interview from, dressed in what I was going to wear, hair done, all of that. And then, made sure the Wi-Fi was going to be stable, made sure that I played with the camera to make sure it looked okay, to make sure that I also just appeared well on camera.
Perfect. Yeah, if it's one thing that Natalia has taught me, it's clean off your cameras. Okay, so I'm interested because Ashley and Natalia both took gap years. So how did you guys prepare for your medical school interview with gap years?
For me, I took 2 gap years. So I graduated in 2020, and then I applied for the 2026 application cycle in 2022 or 2021, one of the two. But anyways, for preparation for me looked more so about researching the values of the school and with a finer tooth comb. And so when I was compiling my list of schools to apply to, I already had a general idea of the things that they value, because I wanted to make sure I was applying to schools that aligned with my values. But then after I received an interview to a particular school, I delved deep, fully researched the mission statement of the school, and then I went to studentdoctor.net to see what type of questions the interviewers were going to ask the interviewees. Now, I knew that wasn't guaranteed for me to be asked the same questions, but it was a good starting point to tailor my responses to questions that I was most likely to be asked. And then, given the fact that I did take 2 gap years, I prepared responses in that reflects the fact that I did take the 2 gap years, and that reflects the fact what I was doing during my gap years. So that way it didn't seem like I was just, on a extended vacation. I wanted to show them that I was being productive in my quest to successfully matriculate to med school. And so I did all that. I also did mock interviews with people I found on Reddit and my significant other at the time, family members, etc. And I also went to YouTube to look at just mock interviews and examples of good interviews versus bad ones, to make sure that I wasn't too well rehearsed, as well as I was still giving the answers that, or giving the responses that was balanced between my personality and also answering directly what they wanted for me to properly convey through my experiences. And overall, that's how I tailored my my responses in my interview day to reflect.
Perfect. So Natalia is definitely the person to ask for this next question. I think this one is kind of low hanging fruit, but it is one that a lot of pre-meds ask. So, what should interviewees wear during virtual interviews?
Yeah, so if y'all know me, I really always want to make a statement with whatever I wear. So I went down a rabbit hole with this. I looked on Pinterest, I looked on Facebook, I asked advisors, and you really just want to show your personality. So what I wore I tried to stay away from the all black look and the the professional look. Nothing is wrong with that, but I like I said, I wanted to make a statement, especially because it was virtual. It was very hard to have them see me in person. So I tried to make it lively. Like I'm gonna try to, I don't know if I can see. Okay, I'm not gonna mess with this. Oh yes, here I can. 1 second. I'm trying to show you. So it wasn't just about what I wore. If you can see right here, this picture, I made sure this picture was in my background because it honestly made a statement and it was a great conversation piece. Both of my interviews, people talked about it, both of them. But to getting back to what I actually physically wore, was a gray blazer, a white shirt, pearls, and I did my makeup and everything. And I'm not saying you have to do that, but I made sure that I wanted to be vibrant. I know a lot of times they tell you should wear a red shirt, a green shirt, something that can be that can pop and that can make you stand out and they remember you. So it's always good. And I know like some of my panelists are talking about how they did mock interviews. On every mock interview I did, I dressed up exactly how I looked on my interview day. I literally have 2 pictures and they look like it's from the same day. I did everything the same way. And I did that because I wanted to, 1, time myself, and then 2, see if I actually like this. And I got a lot of compliments from my mock interviewers. They were like, wow, you're really taking it serious. So I think that if you look good, you feel good, you do good. So it always just is about what you are comfortable with, but making sure that you are dressed head from toe. With virtual, a lot of people say you don't have to wear pants. You don't have to, you can do just top from waist up. But for me, I went from the head to the toe. I did everything. So I think that it's really important for you to act like this isn't a virtual interview. Really give it your all and dress head to toe. That's my advice.
Yeah. I think a lot of students, what they think is that, because we're virtual, you can only see top up. But like you said, if you look good, you feel good, you do good. And so if you have pajama pants on the bottom, there's something in your brain that's still saying like, I'm relaxed, and you want to make sure that you are in interview mode, literally head to toe. I knew you'd be a great person to ask that question. Okay. So Alexis, tell us what advice you would give for how to present yourself throughout the interview day.
Yeah, so I guess just kind of going back on like really reflecting on your core values. So for me, I wanted to present myself professionally and be respectful of the other people that I was also interviewing with. So a lot of the schools that I interviewed at actually had group interviews. So you might be paired with another student and a faculty advisor, and you guys have to take turns. So just being respectful of their answers and, really making sure that you listen to them and just present yourself in a way that seems like, you care about being there, and you obviously do. You've worked hard to get there. So just really thinking about that and internalizing that and saying, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So this is something that's really important, and I'm going to treat it like it's the most important day of my life, because it could be. So yeah, just being respectful and being professional, and then also just being very engaged into what they're saying, asking questions, nodding your head, raising your hand if you're on Zoom. That goes a long way, instead of just trying to blur out or typing in the comments. They want to have a conversation with you. So don't be afraid to speak up, but also, raise your hand if it's your turn to talk. So just a few of those. Yeah.
I think a lot of medical school interview days, so they can be quite long. So you might be going from 8 in the morning until 3 p.m. and you are sitting on your computer the whole time. So I think what Alexis said is super important, that you're making sure that you are wearing that smile for all 8 hours of that day, as excruciating as it might be. Kathleen, can you tell us some advice that you would give on how to present yourself throughout the interview day?
Is kind of going off of what Alexis was saying. Like, if you do an in-person interview, your interview starts as soon as you come within sight of the school or the job or whatever, and then it ends as soon as you get out of sight or out of earshot. So I think that kind of goes for the virtual interviews as well. So like, anytime your camera, your audio is on, you are on. Anytime that you are supposed to be on a group meeting, your camera should be on. You should be muted, and like, you should be, wearing a smile. You should, you need to be aware of what your background is. If you have cats or dogs that bark or meow or want to jump up on your stuff, interviewers don't want to see that as much as like I would like to see that. The interviewers don't. Like, maybe, have a family member go and, take them out for a walk or something, or take them somewhere else. Same goes for, roommates, having them out of the room that you're in or whatever the space is. I think the other thing, like the best interview, and I've used this a couple times, and someday I'll tell the person that was this interviewee. Last year for I sit on SLU's admissions committee as a student, and the best interview I saw was someone who, like, she was so excited to be there. But yet she, as Alexa said, she was very respectful of everyone else. She interacted well with the other students. She asked really great questions. You could just tell that she wanted to be at medical school. She wanted to be at our institution, and she just did a really great job, and her personality shone through, even though it was virtual. You could tell who she was through that. And so, and she ended up she is in medical school, and it's kind of neat to get to see her, go through the same classes we did last year and everything. So all of that sort of stuff is just things to keep in mind. What's on your screen, how you sound, and then also just, again, as Lexi was saying, like showing your personality and being respectful are, I think, really huge things.
Perfect. Thank you. Ashley, what are some baseline virtual interview etiquette rules that you followed during your interview day?
For me, given the fact that I worked throughout college and took the 2 gap years, I was a little bit more mature in the sense of I knew how to conduct myself during interviews. And so applying my etiquette from working and just translating over to my interview day for med school, I didn't really have a particular etiquette playbook that I had to go out my way to remember. But some of the basic interviewing etiquette rules that I had for myself, given that all my interviews were virtual, was the fact that I made sure that my background wasn't too chaotic or too active. And what I mean by that is that if I had a painting in my background, I was very intentional with the fact that it was there for a purpose. It was there to potentially introduce a talking point if my interviewer wanted to ask me about it. I made sure that my background wasn't dirty or full of unnecessary things like clothes or artifacts, things like that. And I made sure that how I looked was definitely presentable. Also, during the interview, I made sure that if people were talking, I waited until they finished, maybe even a couple of seconds after, and then spoke in response to whatever they said. Or I always thanked people for their time, especially the interviewers, as I know a lot of them are volunteering to interview the applicants. And even if they weren't, I still wanted to show my appreciation for the fact that they, listened to me and had a conversation with me. And I also made sure to repeat if I was confused. I would make sure to repeat back whatever they asked of me in my own words, just so to make sure that we were on the same page of what was being asked of me versus me assuming and missing the mark. And so I think with those few interview etiquette tips that I kind of stuck by, my interview days went pretty smoothly in that aspect.
Okay. Thank you. And then Natalia, what about you? What are some kind of like baseline etiquette rules that you made sure to follow with each interview that you did?
Yes. So one thing, I know Tyler made a joke and said I clean my camera. Make sure you clean your camera. But not only that, I made sure that I had perfect lighting. I had a ring light, and I made sure that they can see me. I wanted them to take me serious. I wanted them to see me and not be thinking, "Oh, she doesn't even have perfect light." I just wanted to eliminate all the things that could go wrong, which may seem like small details, but they really matter. Additionally, one thing that I did do is after your interview, you make sure you send an email to everybody who you encountered, whether it's a student, whether it's a faculty member. And the reason being is because you really do, like Ashley said, you want to thank them for their time. They're taking time out of their day, and a lot of them are physicians away from their patients to help you get into medical school, to advocate for you through this interview. And be engaging. No matter how many medical interviews you've been on, if this is your 15th one, that's okay. Make sure that you are acting like this is your first one. I think that that's really important. Just seeing that some students can get laid back and sit back and just like this because they feel secure, but you never know what blessing you can have at the medical school that you're interviewed at that moment. It could be a full ride. You could have been getting a full ride, but you would have never known because you're a little bit overconfident. We're going to say that. So I think just being very confident, being prepared, and know your application. It sucks if you put something on there you cannot talk about it. Make sure you can talk about everything on your application because everything is fair game.
So I want to sidebar and kind of like point out one thing that you mentioned about the thank you letters post interview. We didn't prepare this question, but it's a really good question to ask. So I want to make sure that it gets answered. So I know when I was applying for medical schools, I was torn between, do I handwrite the letter or do I type it up? So for any panelist that wants to answer, what is your opinion? Do we handwrite thank you letters to all the people on interview day, or do we type it up and send it in an email?
I'm going to say that you should email. The reason being is because you want to send it to them right away so they can remember you. And one thing when I was doing, when I wrote my interview, I talked about something that me and that person shared. I remember one time, one of the physicians who was interviewing me had mentioned Sir William Osler. And I looked him up. I looked up a quote that I felt like really I identify with. And that was her favorite. He was her favorite. So I made sure that I mentioned that in my letter so I can let her know that 1, I am interested in going here. 2, I had a great time meeting with you. And 3, I was paying attention. Like, that's it. So I think writing them will be great, but it'll be different if you was in person. So maybe if we're in person, it'll be different if you're still there the next day. You can like slip it in their office. But once again, you really just have their emails.
Yep. Does anyone else have an opinion? Did anyone on our panel handwrite any thank you letters? Or was it just me? Am I the crazy one? I did. I will agree with Natalia. So I hand wrote a thank you letter to one school and then stumbled on a Reddit forum that basically said, don't do that, because you never know when that letter is going to get there. And so if I interview on a Monday and the letter doesn't arrive at the school until a Friday, and it's a physician that might not be on the admissions team, or like maybe because not everyone that interviews you is actively like in the school that you're interviewing at. So for example, my interviewer was a nephrologist. So she's not walking around St. Louis University every day, interacting with the admissions team. So I sent that letter. It could or could not have gotten to the person that interviewed me. I don't know. So I would agree that sending an email is definitely the right way to go. One other thing for just kind of like interview etiquette, if you're virtual, so make sure that, so like if you're looking at my computer right now, I'm looking at my screen, but if I look at the camera, it kind of looks like I'm looking at you. So one thing that I was taught when I was doing the mock interviews, like Ashley and some of the other panelists have mentioned, was they said, when you are answering a question, look at your camera on your computer. And then when you are listening, you can kind of look away because it can get redundant just staring at the camera. So that was some really good advice that I received as well. Okay, so this is my favorite question because you are going to get asked this question in any medical school interview that you get. So usually at the end of your interview with a physician or a student, They're going to say, do you have any questions for me? And I know all of my panelists will agree that if your response to that question is no, I don't, that's not a good idea. So we'll start with Alexis and we'll work our way down. What are some back pocket common interview questions that you should be, or that you prepared yourself to have when they ask that question?
Yeah, so I had two that I consistently asked at all the schools. So one was, if you could choose anything about your fourth year students, what makes them different from other schools? I feel like that question really shows the values of the school and how it prepares its students. So I really enjoyed that question. And then the other question that I asked a lot was, since the faculty or whoever is interviewing you often has a choice in where they work, what made you choose the school and what made you choose this institution to work at? And I think that also really shows like the things that they like about it, and also sometimes they'll offer you things that they don't like and things that could be improved. So it kind of sets the tone to have a really open conversation with them about their personal experiences and what kind of led them to choosing that place as well.
Thank you. Okay, Kathleen. So for you, what were some questions that you had prepared in your mind whenever the physician was going to say, what questions do you or do you have any questions for me at the end of your interview?
So I also asked the question of why did you come here for both of the kind of interview processes, and why did you choose to work here and why did you stay? Both had been here for quite a while, and so I was like, why did you start? Why did you stay? And then the other thing that I like to ask, so in many cases you can ask for your interviewer's name ahead of time, one so that you know how to pronounce it, and two so that you can look up a little bit about them. So I would look up a little bit about each person, and one was very heavy in research. So I asked about the research, and we spent almost as much time talking about her research as we did doing my interview. Then the other person was an ER physician, and this was during COVID. It was like, I was like one of the first groups to interview during COVID, fall of 2020. And so I, asked about being an ER physician during COVID. And so, just kind of some sort of question about that person that you're interviewing with. And if you happen to blank and you don't have a question to pull up, you can just ask, then you don't want to sound stupid. One of my mock interview people told me that one of the best answers they got, and actually one that I think I gave whenever I was like, I have no idea what I want to say, is like, actually, no, I honestly don't think I have any. I think we talked about all the stuff during our interview, but I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I would just like to reiterate that X, Y, Z about me. So, if you happen to blank about that, you can just kind of take it into, actually, no, I think we covered it. But thank you. And like, I would just like to reiterate, this part of my application that I think makes me meet your mission.
Perfect. Thank you. Ashley, what about you?
For me, my mantra was mainly focused on being personable. So when I was thinking about questions to ask, I was thinking of questions to ask that pertain to either my interest or their interest. And so I'm a huge foodie. I love food. So one of my questions was consistently asking each interviewer, what type of food do they enjoy and what restaurant is the best producer of that food. So if somebody said they love Chinese food, then I'm asking where do I go to get the best Chinese food in the city? In this case, like St. Louis, for example. And then they would tell me, and then I would write it down. And then I would usually ask my second question that in reflection to whatever they told me during the interview. So if they were a fan of going hiking, I would ask them for recommendations on the best place to hike that's nearby the city. Or if they were a fan of reading, for example, I would ask them what are their favorite books to read. And then if it was a student, then I would tailor my question to be more reflective of things that I wanted to know that I felt that the student was in the best position to answer. And so I would always start off by asking them what was their favorite thing about the school, and then what was one thing that they felt that the school needed to improve on. And usually that would catch them slightly off guard. They would think about it and give me more of a genuine response. And then that would be my moment of opportunity to see exactly what the school needs to focus on that is relatively raw and unfiltered compared to the things that they were telling me during the overall presentation about the school.
Perfect. Thank you. And Natalia, last but not least, what about you?
So I tried to get them to look into my eyes, I guess. Not my eyes, my shoes, my perspective. So one question that I asked them is saying, if I were your child, because a lot of them are older, meaning the physicians and whoever, if I were your child, why would you convince me to go to this school over another school? And the reason being I wanted to put it that way is because I wanted them to look at me outside of a applicant and just anybody they're trying to sell the school to, but really as a person who this is will determine my my future, and really like give me the honest answer. I actually got a lot of feedback on that question and saying that's a great question, and a lot of students don't ask that type of question. So that was one thing that I got. And then another thing is this is a common question that I was reading when I was reading on Reddit and Student Doctor Network, was, are there any changes to the curriculum, to the school that will be occurring within the next, within the near and far future that I should be aware of? I think that is really big because it's easy to omit things, but it's not a lie. So just saying, yeah, we have this, but tomorrow that could be gone. So I think that that's a big thing for any applicant to take into consideration, to ask, because you wanna see what your future looks like at this school. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to ask, and it is one that I did not ask that I wish I did. Was, are there going to be any curriculum changes? Because the curriculum of the school, you want to make sure you find one that meshes with how you learn best, and how you think you're going to be most successful. So I think that's good. So some of the key points that I just want to emphasize again for our listeners and our watchers is, for those back pocket interview questions that you should be asking your interviewer is basically ask about their research. They are literally going to love that. Like Kathleen said, make sure you research how to pronounce their name. That's going to be super important because it gets kind of uncomfortable if you're like, hi, doctor, and then, or you just completely butcher their name. So make sure you know how to pronounce their name. And don't be afraid to have fun. I did not know, I've never heard that question that Ashley asked about what kind of food do you like and what places in the city that you live in serve that food best. I think that's a really good question, because a lot of physicians love their community. And I think that shows that you have an interest in their community. So excellent. Okay, so I'm going to skip forward just a little bit. So for the applicants that took a gap year, what are important points to highlight to make when talking about that experience with your medical school interview?
So I took a gap year. So I'm a non-traditional student. I said that before, but my undergraduate resume was not the best. So I knew I would have to get a master's program to better my GPA and better my chances of getting into medical school. After taking my master's, I ended up applying and I didn't get in. So one thing I wanted them to see within my application from the first time I applied to the second time I applied, because I applied with the same credentials except for more experience. I didn't take the MCAT over. I didn't take any more classes after that. I just did more things and revamped my application, such as my personal statement and rewrote my personal statement and my experiences. So one thing that I made sure to do was get more experience, show them that despite, any flaws I had in undergrad, I made sure that I showcased that I can, one, handle the work, to handle the academic work and clinical work. So I was a clinical laboratory assistant and then a clinical laboratory analyst during COVID. So I worked in different laboratory labs to do like PCR, plating and different things like that. So I kind of wanted to emphasize within my gap year and any question that they asked, that I made sure that I didn't just, I'm not saying nothing working in like at a restaurant or something like that is bad. It's not that at all. But I wanted them to know, like, I am serious about immersing myself in the medical and the clinical world. And I think that was one big thing that really did showcase, because I don't have any research experience. However, I do have experience with the techniques that a lot of researchers use. So that was something that my interviewer was like, oh, so you know how to do these things that is done during research. And I was like, yes, I know how to do that. I can run these machines. I can do it manually. I can do it, whatever. And I think that was one thing that allowed her to sell me to the admissions committee as well.
Perfect. Okay, Ashley, what about you?
For me, the few things that I highlighted was the fact that how I grew from between the 2 years, the 2 gap years that I took. And so the reason why I took 2 gap years was because I am a first generation college graduate. And so just getting my bachelor's degree was enough of a celebration to where I was not necessarily focused on planning the next steps. And because of that, I didn't plan my courses out the right way to where I would have all my prerequisites finished by the time that I matriculated into med school. And I wouldn't have all the other surrounding components of my application tailored and ready by the time that I graduated college. And so because of that, I took a couple of years to take the few classes that I needed to check off the box for the prerequisites, get my science GPA up because I didn't do too well in my freshman year, and then start crafting my essays and my responses for my primary application and even secondaries to where I was satisfied and confident that it would land me at least one interview for the upcoming cycle. And so when relaying all this to the interviewers, I took ownership of my part in why my application wasn't where I needed it to be to apply in the shoes of a typical or traditional applicant. And I also put a spin to it to show how I grew between then and now to where the issues that led me to be in the position that I was wouldn't be of concern as a medical student who was facing residency, as that's a whole nother lengthy process. And so I've only been asked about my application or why I took a couple of gap years once, which was during my interview for SLU. And as I was just letting her know and repeating the spiel that I practiced, all I could see was her head shaking and her writing down things in her notes. And so I could tell that I was able to take what would potentially be seen as a negative and put a twist on it to where it was a positive and something that she could root for me when she was speaking to the admissions committee.
Perfect. Thank you. So then the only thing I want to hit on, so I was also non-traditional, took a gap year. I was non-traditional in the sense that I did not graduate with a pre-medical degree or a degree in science at all. So my bachelor's is in criminology, criminal justice. So just for any viewers who might have a degree that is not in the field of science whatsoever, for the interview, what I would advise is that you make sure that you are talking about the degree that you went for. So they want to see not only that you're interested in medicine and maybe how your degree or that non-science degree, has a connection with medicine, but they also want to see that you were able to really dive into the field that you were studying. So they're not necessarily, so for criminal justice, they weren't necessarily looking for, okay, like how does criminal justice and medicine, match together, even though they did ask that question, but they were looking for like, how did you immerse yourself within the criminal justice field? So that way they can see that I do have dedication and I'm not just kind of bouncing specialties. Okay. So every interview that I've ever had, and I know my panelists have, they always ask some of those like basic interview questions. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Stuff like that. And those can often be the scariest because they're asking interviewees those same questions. So you have to give a response that helps you stand out. So I want to ask my panelists, starting with Alexis, please provide one interview question that you can expect to be asked on interview day for medical schools, and then how you had that answer prepared.
Yeah, so one question that I got a lot that I actually was really surprised about was people asking me, if I could put 3 things down for your application, what would those 3 things be? And I wasn't, the first time I got that question, I actually was not prepared for it at all. I was like, 3 things, there are so many things I want you to write down. But I think for me, going back again to just my core values. So I talked about how I grew I also took a gap year. So I talked about the growth that I had during that time, and then something that's important to me, and then also that I'm dedicated to school. So that question really threw me for a loop the first time, but really just honing in onto who you are now in that current moment and how you've grown as a person over the last 4 years. I think that the application itself, even just in writing it, makes you do a lot of self-reflection. I mean, even the application for me just taught me a lot about myself. And so I think going into interviews, I was like really grateful for that because I kind of understood myself better after all of the writing that I had to do. So, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, Kathleen, what about you? What is a question that interviewees this application cycle can expect to be asked? And then how would you advise preparing for that question?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the traditional questions you can find online, like you can Google, like 100 most common medical school interview questions and stuff, and you can go through and practice those as many times as you want to like get an answer for all of them. One that doesn't really show up on any of them is some formulation of why, how, and tell me more. And that can apply to literally any of the experiences that you put on your application. So that goes towards the, like, don't just study the 100 questions and call it done. Go through and for each question, think about the things that they could ask you about it, especially, like, let's say that you shadowed a surgeon and you saw a T-lift spine procedure. Know why they would do that surgery, even if you didn't discuss it. Show curiosity and Google after the fact. Like, why would you do a T-lift? Well, somebody's disc herniated and they have spinal cord compression or whatever. And then, like, what are the symptoms the patient would have? And, like, what is a T-lift surgery? And also that kind of thing. So, like, why did they do XYZ? Why did you do XYZ? Why did you volunteer here? The first question out of the gate, it was literally like, hi, so you're Kathleen. Why did you shadow X, Y, and Z person? I'm like, okay, we're not even talking about why I want to be a doctor. But so I think that's just some combination of those sorts of questions of just like, tell me more about these sorts of things. And for literally all 15 of your experiences or however many you put on there, is going to be super important.
Yeah, that why question or how question scared me and I was not prepared for it. Ashley, what about you? What is a question that students can be expected to ask and how should they prepare for that question?
The most common question I had was related to some type of failure in my my life, my resume, my academic experience, etc. And so, for example, I was asked about to tell them a time that I failed, whether that outside of academics, and I pointed to an experience I had at my job that I failed and it compromised the communication safety of other coworkers. And then instead of stopping at that point, I also took it a step further to show how I grew from that experience. And so when faced with a tell me about a time that you failed type of question, you always want to make sure that you end that response by showing how you grew, what you learned from it, and how it made you a better person moving forward, or how it changed something about yourself or something about your situation positively moving forward. So if you had an academic setback, don't just say, oh, I failed at, math, for example, and just leave it at that. Tell them about how you failed from that. You did some self-reflections and you started going to tutoring, talking to your professor, starting doing group study dates with your colleagues, etc. And then tell them about the results of that, how you started getting better grades and how you learned how to do time management and etc. So you always want to have a response to that, especially if there are blemishes on your application, because if they ask and you provide them a satisfactory response, then that red flag is no longer a red flag because you've shown growth from the time that the incident occurred. And especially make sure that you are pulling from experiences that happened maybe a year or two ago, because you want that period of growth to be there. So that way it is more reassuring to them that it is that opportunity of growth present versus something that was maybe 2 weeks ago and you still don't have that timeline to show them that you move forward from that failure that you've mentioned to them.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Natalia, what about you?
I think the biggest question to always be prepared for, sometimes they're going to ask you, sometimes they don't, but it is definitely a question that will come up in some form or fashion, is why medicine? Like your why. I think that is the hardest question to answer. I literally, even during my mock interviews, I would say I literally stumbled so much of that question because you know why. You're very passionate about it. And sometimes when you're talking about yourselves, it becomes very difficult to actually put those thoughts and put those passions into words. So I think like practicing that and being genuine, like don't try to do all the fancy stuff, just truly be genuine. Don't say you want to help people, not that, but really just maybe say, give a little bit about your experience. I think that's a perfect way to be a little bit personable with medicine. I think a lot of times medicine is serious, of course, but sometimes it's that one experience you had that really ignited that passion and that desire to be the voice in medicine or something. I don't know. And then I think, like what Ashley's saying, just to kind of piggyback off that, and Kathleen as well, whenever they ask about what's your strengths and your weaknesses, make sure that if they ask about a weakness and you give a strength, don't do that. I think my weakness, someone asked me, what was my weakness? I said, I think my weakness is my confidence in my speech. And that wasn't a bad thing. It was just more so like, that is something that everyone here can probably attest to that and tell you that that's something I always talk about. But what I did tell them after I told them that this is something I battle with, I say, but that doesn't stray me away from taking opportunities to speak in front of groups. I'm always speaking. I'm always talking. I talk too much sometimes. And I think that allowed me to get over that fear and over that uncomfortability that I do have with, and that confidence, that lack of confidence in my speech. So I think that's another way to kind of like stray away from, or kind of make a positive out of a negative.
Mm-hmm. I think the one that you said, why medicine, I think that's a really important one. So 3 of the 4 people on this panel are on the admissions team. The only reason Alexis isn't on it yet, and I'm going to make her be on it, is because she's not they haven't done like the cycle for her to apply. But nonetheless, one of the things that you should remember is that you are interviewing with a lot of other people. So your answers to these questions need to stand out. So when on the admissions board, what often happens is they're presenting these students in front of everyone on the admissions board. And what people are looking for is, how does this person stand out? A lot of people are answering that why medicine question with, because I want to help people. Don't we all? I don't think any one of us going into medicine says, I don't want to help people. That would be contradictory. So making sure that, I think my answer for that was because I like science. As simple as that. I like the complexity of it. I like trying to figure things out. Like I said, I was a criminal justice major. So quite literally, I was like, science makes me feel like a detective sometimes. And so that was my answer, but be able to have that. And I think the other one is that strength and weaknesses question. That is also, if they ask you it, that's a time for you to be able to stand out as a student. So if you use the like, what are your strengths? Oh, well, I have good communication skills, don't we all? Like, find something that like really helps you stand out. And I think what Natalia said with her weakness, that's also important. Be vulnerable. They're not asking you what your weakness is to try to sift through, is her weakness a weakness, or, they want to know, like, are you in tune with yourself? And are you able to be vulnerable about it? So that is a time for you to be vulnerable, with your interviewer. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left for probably one more question, or prepared question, then we'll have time for 15 minutes for a Q&A. So if any of you guys watching have any questions, feel free to comment it. I can see when you comment. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll be able to see it, and we'll try and get those questions answered. So go ahead and submit those if you have any. But last question for our panelists. So Alexis hit on this a little bit, making sure to research your school before you apply. That's the other part with being on the admissions team. They always talk about, this student did not seem like they cared about the school. So let's actually just start with Alexis. So what is something that you made sure to research about the school when you prepared for your interview?
Yeah, so I knew the mission statements like the back of my hand. That was like where I started with every school. But I'll say on top of that, I think I knew that I wanted to do research, so research opportunities. Also, just looking at match lists was something that I ended up doing a lot. Seeing what specialties were common, where people ended up going. Let's see, what else did I do? A lot of schools will have, like, we have distinction programs. A lot of other schools have that too. So, what makes the school different? Do you want to be super involved in service, and do you want to have a distinction coming out of that? And what are the opportunities that come along with that? And so just really researching what makes the school different, what makes the area different. I'm from North Carolina, so St. Louis is a lot different from home than it is like the complete opposite, actually. But really being aware of that, and just understanding how that's going to affect you in the future, and being able to talk about that, because I have had a lot of people say, well, why do you want to come here? You're from the mountains in a beautiful area, so what makes you want to come to St. Louis, or what makes you want to come to a big city? So just really knowing the niche things about the school, and how they can apply to you going forward.
Perfect. Thank you. So Kathleen is pro SLU everything. She loves Kathleen. Went to undergrad for SLU. Girl probably wears blue every day. She is a SLU fan, but nonetheless, she probably still did research prior to the interview. So tell us, Kathleen, what did you research about the School of Medicine?
Yeah, I said I was kind of in a unique spot in that I went to undergrad, and then I also I spent time in the medical school and in the hospital shadowing and volunteering and things like that. So it was almost kind of like you do sub-Is for residency. It's like I did like a 4-year long undergrad sub-I for medical school. Like I sat in the same chairs that I sit in now to study for the MCAT in the med school library and that kind of thing. So I definitely paid attention as I was walking through to the environment and to how do people treat each other, that sort of thing. But in terms of actual research, just like Alexa said, I also looked up the mission statement over and over and over again. I mean, I scoured the School of Medicine website to see what opportunities are there for students, because the ultimate goal of primary to secondary to interview process is to get to know you better and to pick students who align with their mission, but also who they can support, but also it goes the other way, so that will the students fit in there as well. So whenever they're looking at people, if somebody says hey, I want to do research, but that's not a research heavy school, it may not be that you don't you're not a good student. It just means that maybe you wouldn't be happy there, and they can kind of maybe see that more better than you can. And so I would look up I looked at the mission statement. I looked at all the different programs they had, so that I really knew that SLU was the right place for me to stay, and it was. So I definitely got to know the school a little bit better, maybe than I would have, definitely than I would have as applying from outside. But I still, kept my ears open and eyes open to see all the different things.
Perfect. And I think that's an important point too, is that when you are applying to these schools, go into it with this mindset that they're not only interviewing you, you're interviewing them, and you want to make sure that it is a school that is, because that's going to be a school that's on your residency application. That's a school that you're going to be with for the rest of your career, maybe, but it's always going to be associated with you. So just make sure that you kind of know the school that you're applying to. So Ashley, what was something that you made sure to research about the school before your interview?
Piggybacking off of Alexis and Kathleen's responses, the mission statement, and then taking it a step further, and then seeing if they truly live up to their mission statement. So, for example, if they say they value community service, but I see that from talking to other medical students within the school, that maybe most of their community service initiatives are paused or on hold, or maybe are limited in the capacity that I was hoping for, then it's like, I'm wondering now if they're really, walking the good talk. Also, I also went to make sure that my priority list for things I wanted in a medical school was aligned to the mission statement. So, for example, I learned that I valued community service and being integrated within the city more than I valued research. But I also valued research, though, just in, maybe a second priority versus a first. So with SLU, I realized that they were very strong within community service, but they didn't prioritize research as much as I wanted them to. And so with that, I looked around to see, I really like that they value community service. How can I accommodate the fact that research is not the primary focus of this institution? And that's when I learned that I can do research at other institutions. So there is a medical school called Washington University here in St. Louis, and at the time, they allowed for medical students to do research with their faculty. And so for me, I found that I could have the best of both worlds, matriculating at SLU, who values community service, while also doing the research in Alzheimer's dementia at Washington University. And so that's how I went about it.
Perfect. Okay, and Natalia.
So once again, Natalia went down a rabbit hole. I literally went down the timeline of SLU, like from when SLU was started. And one thing that I'm from Chicago, and we used to have this thing called the Bud Billiken Parade, and SLU's mascot is the Billiken. And I was like, is this have any tie to it? And honestly, it does. It goes back to like the Black historian newsletter that was predominantly in Chicago, and it's a whole little story. Like I said, I went down a rabbit hole, but I wanted to make sure that like I understood the school, because I think for me in undergrad, I went to a school where I kind of had to, because of financial reasons, like they gave me a scholarship, I had to go. But was I necessarily happy there? Not all the times. Like you make the best out of every situation. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that this school, like this is something that's going to be my future. So I wanted to make sure, I researched that. And then also I did my research outside of this. I contacted Black students, because at the end of the day, I'm a Black woman in medicine. I'm a unicorn in medicine. Let's be honest about it. So I think that I wanted to make sure that if this is the school I was going to go to, are they going to protect me? Are they going to teach me how to be a Black woman in medicine? Because that's something my mama can't teach me. That's something my daddy can't teach me. So I think that like having that having that experience or that insight from someone who was now sitting in the seats that I was at that time. That I'm sitting in their seats then. Now, I think that was something that was important to me. So do not be afraid to reach out to the students, to ask them, how do they treat, if you are a minority student, how do they treat their minority students? Are they kind to them? Are they supportive? What is the remediation rates? I think that is something that was big and important for me.
Yeah. Remediation rate is, I think a lot of pre-medical students don't really know what that is, because the idea of failing in medical school it's like, what? Like that happens? It does. So for those who are watching that don't know what remediation is essentially where if you attend a pass-fail school, and it might be the same with schools that actually still give grades, but I don't know, because SLU is pass-fail. They'll set their own passing rate, and if you score below that, it's remediation, and so you'll have to retake that class, and then if you have multiple remediations, you'll have to retake that whole year, and it's kind of like a safety net for medical students, because medical school is hard. It's a safety net for students if you just have a really bad organ block. It kind of allows you to try and get back with it and catch up. But sometimes, especially for minority students, that transition from undergrad, if you take a gap year, but undergrad or gap year into medical school can be hard. So remediation rates can be particularly high for students of color. So I think asking, what kind of academic support there is at your school as well is important. So that way you can make sure you're attending a school that addresses that idea that remediation might be disproportionate. Okay, so that is our session. We have kind of like 10-ish minutes for audience questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment either on the Facebook Live that you're watching or on YouTube. I'll be able to see all of it. But while we wait, I'm just going to popcorn some of the questions that I know I had when I was applying for medical school. So I'm going to ask my panelists. Okay, let's see here. Alexis, what was the scariest part about the interview?
I think for me, I you know, applying to medical school is a really long process. And so finally getting an interview was kind of like unbelievable to me. And so I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. And going into it, like the first 10 minutes of the interview were always like the worst. And then I kind of slowly figured out that, it really is just a conversation and you just need to be yourself and have fun and really get to know the people that you're talking to. But yeah, the first 10 minutes of the interview were always the worst for me because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do well. I'm not going to do well. And it's going to be an all day thing and I'm going to mess it up. But ended up working out. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Natalia, what about you? What was the scariest part of your interview?
The scariest part, I don't know if you want to call this the interview, was the moment I got the email. Oh my God, that was the worst. That was the worst day because I knew when it was coming. Honestly, I'd rather have not knew what day they were going to tell me, but I knew. And I was out. I tried to, make myself busy. I was out all day shopping and just really trying to like keep my mind off of it. But every time my phone rang, my heart dropped. And I'm an emotional person, so I'm like trying to hold back tears and trying to hold back all of the anxiety I'm feeling. And as soon as I was out driving, I was on my way home, and as soon as I got the email, I pulled in to a Bank of America because I could not wait. I waited too long. Whether it was going to be good or bad, I was in the car and I opened it and I just screamed to thank God for it. So I think that was the worst part, but it was relieved by so much like joy and tears. And honestly, I still had, and I didn't tell my family right away. So I kind of kept reliving that experience from all the time I was waiting after the interview. And I don't know, I think that was it. And then another part to be in the interview, if I was talking too long, she would be like, okay. And I was just like, oh Lord, I'm talking too long. I'm in my head at this point. So I think that the not knowing if they like you, if they are vibing with you, and you could think you did terrible, but you did perfect, or you could do perfect and you think, they don't really mess with you. So it's just like the not knowing if they really like was vibing with you.
Yeah. I think I got my first med school acceptance letter when I was in the drive-thru at Sonic, and me and the Sonic drive-thru person had a moment. Because I was crying and I was like, okay, but like, give me my burger. But yeah, so I think that's a cute question. I think that you guys could also ask on your interview day. If you happen to get like a student interviewer, is like, where were you when you got your first med school acceptance? That's a cute question because literally, as Natalia was talking about it, I was tearing up because it's so emotional and it was so exciting. Yeah, no, I remember those tears, that scream, and that was the best burger I ever had, ever.
Let's on your social media post that question and tell people to respond with the video. I think that'll be a good thing that we could do. We could post to our SNMA chapters page. But okay, sorry.
Mm-hmm. That's cute, actually. Yeah. Okay, so Kathleen, what is the hardest question you feel like you got during your med school interview?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think back. My med school interview itself, I didn't think was that difficult. It was one of like the pre-interview sort of thing where it was just very similar. It was kind of like a committee interview. One of the questions that I got asked was, it's like, if you have a patient, and like I had never taken an ethics class, this is something that like they ask on step one, is like, if you have a patient who is a smoker and you have a patient who is not a smoker and they both present to your clinic with lung cancer, which one do you get better treatment to, or something along those lines? Or like, if somebody gets lung cancer, how does your treatment of them compare, whether or not they have like lung cancer or not? Or if somebody presents to your clinic with HIV, do you treat them differently, whether they got it from a needle stick from working in a hospital, or what if they were had a LGBTQ community sort of environmental exposure, however you want to phrase that. And of course the correct answer is you don't do anything like different, and I, at that point, I had volunteered on the hematology and oncology floor, so I had helped to take care of as a volunteer HIV positive and AIDS patients and things like that. Oncology, I had taken care of lung cancer patients before and stuff, and it had never occurred to me, it had never really mattered, so I never really thought about it. it's like having to think about it then. And ultimately I was like, well, you wouldn't treat them any differently. Like, you know, they can't help that they got cancer either which way. Or they can't help that they got HIV either which way. And so that, I think that was the hardest question that I got. At least that's the one that sticks out in my mind, just being like, wait.
Yeah. Okay. So we have an audience question. I believe it's for Natalia, possibly. So the question is, for the panel member who shared about her struggles in undergrad, when did it click for you and what kept you going?
So freshman year, first semester, I'm great at math, but college algebra, I got a D. And I called my mom and I cried and I said, I want to come home. This is not for me. So that was just the start of showing me that like this is not going to be an easy road for me. Like this is something different. I can't study how I used to study. But one of the biggest times it clicked for me that was when I went to my advisor and she asked me for my plan B and that I would not become a physician. And that one, I didn't say, I'm not going to say I went off, but I was very stern in my response. And she immediately was said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. And I think coming from knowing my passion and knowing my background, I knew why I reacted that way. I'm not totally sure if she knew, but I think for me, it was that no matter what, each semester, even if I didn't do well the semester prior, I knew I was going to have to work 10 times harder the next semester. And any false and failures that I had, I made sure that after I just needed to get to graduation. I really needed to get to graduation. And after every semester, I made sure that I tried to do a little bit better than the semester prior. I myself had to work 3 jobs to get myself through school. So it was really hard. But after that, I knew that I wanted this bad, like worse. I don't know how to say it. I knew I wanted this more than the struggles I was facing. So I made sure that anything I did, I made sure that I put my foot down and I said, all right, well, I'm gonna have to look for another opportunity. I looked through mentorship. I made sure that I looked at programs that actually, like even medical schools that will look at my master's grades more than my undergrad grades, because I ended up getting a 4.0 in my master's program. So like I made sure that I did everything that I could do to honestly showcase who I am as a student, and that what happened in undergrad wasn't just the end all be all, because the reality of it, y'all, we were babies coming out of high school, 18 years old. And honestly, my high school wasn't the strongest in, sciences, honestly. So I didn't have the foundation that I needed to perform, but I didn't make that excuse. I made sure that I took what I had and I kept going. So I hope that answered your question.
I think so. I stumbled on a quote this week when I was on TikTok, and it literally was, we don't stay motivated, we stay disciplined. And I think like we oftentimes get in our head, we're like, oh, like I'm not smart enough for this, I can't do this. But I think it's important to remember that like education and intelligence is not intrinsic. We are not born smart. We have to train our brain to figure out how to understand, and we have to be willing to learn how our brain wants to work. So, and that's something that I think a lot of people should go into medical school with, is that your brain is a muscle. Just like how you have to train your biceps and your quads, you have to train your brain to be able to handle that workload. And it's the same with undergrad. It's a lot of material, and you are learning from literal PhDs. So these are people that have been in their field for decades, probably, for being honest. So make sure that like you remember, you keep that in mind. Like you are smart, you can do it. It's just that you got to work. You might have to work a little bit harder. But it's not that you can't do it. You just have to have that discipline and be willing to be vulnerable. So I think that's all the time that we have for this. I've put the MAPS academics email in the chat. I hope that this session was super helpful for all of you guys that are watching. Please do not hesitate to reach out. If you want any of the panelists' information, their email, just go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll be sure to get their emails to you. I'm going to introduce them one more time, just so that way you have their information. So Alexis is an M1 at SLU. Kathleen is an M2 at SLU. Ashley is an M2 at SLU, and Natalia is an M2 at SLU. So if you guys have any questions, or you want to connect with them for mentorship, I'm sure that they are more than willing to share their information. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, emails is in the chat on all 3 platforms. So let me know if you have any questions. Thank you guys.